Hello and welcome to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Head of the Machine. This episode follows the continuing adventures of John and the other Speedwagon Foundation stand hunters, so if you haven't seen the previous episodes, go check those out first. There will be a link on the screen now and in the description. Alright, enjoy. Chapter 1, The White Wolf.
So what was so urgent that I'm not allowed to sleep tonight?
Asked John, mildly annoyed and sitting in one of the comfortable reclining seats on the plane.
15 years ago, there was a massacre in Ise, Japan.
Miss Velvet began to explain.
Ise. Why have I heard that name?
Asked John.
There's a famous shrine there dedicated to the goddess Amaterasu. Now shush.
She continued.
All the victims of the murders had similar wounds. Claw marks and large stab wounds, consistent with those of a short sword. The only surviving witness was written off as a madman. His testimony stated that the victims had been killed by a floating blade, an invisible monster. Sound familiar?
John sighed.
Sure, but why is this suddenly urgent if the murders happened 15 years ago?
Recently, another victim has surfaced.
She said, placing a picture of a mutilated corpse in front of the now curious John.
Same stab wounds, same claw marks. And here's the interesting part.
John leaned in to hear her say it.
This victim was a stand user. He was already on our radar, but he was a low priority target.
John returned to his reclining position, intrigued.
Well then, this just got a lot more interesting. Any leads on the new target?
Velvet flipped through some of the pages on her clipboard and said,
Well, if you were listening, we're headed to Ise, Japan. From there, you'll have to gather some intel. I suggest you start at the scene of the crime. How's your Japanese?
John spoke many languages fluently, Japanese being one of them, as his job tended to take him all over the planet. However lazy and lackadaisical he seemed, John always kept his cool, and was regarded as wise beyond his years. As the plane touched down at the airport, the superstition that John had felt boarding the plane had wound down. For some reason, whenever he stepped into an airplane, he always felt uneasy, as if the plane itself was going to crash. Regardless, he stepped off the terminal, and wandered into the pedestrian's daily grind. First things first, he thought. Time to get some coffee. It was late spring, early summer, and even as he waited for a taxi to take him into Ise, he didn't feel out of place here, as he had in China. John's Japanese heritage could be the cause of this calming feeling he felt as he sipped his coffee in the light of the setting sun. Sooner or later, he would be in the middle of a fight, and his peace would be broken. His was not the worst life, though. He still gets to pick his own wardrobe, and the outfit he chose today resembled that of Neo from The Matrix. Dark glasses and long black jacket over his faded gray tank top, jeans and brown work boots, a silver watch on his right hand and a silver chain around his neck with a matching Aztec charm on it. He was lost in thought so long he almost didn't notice what happened next.
Hey, be on your toes, dude. I don't trust any of these people. They all look shady to me.
A familiar voice said next to him. The visage of his stand, deep purple, appeared in the seat across from him, glancing around and watching for any suspicious characters.
Take it easy, DP.
John said calmingly.
It's not like our target is going to be this far away from our destination. And also, it wouldn't be fair if we intervened in any non-stand related affairs while we're here. Just relax, enjoy the breeze.
Deep Purple leaned back in the chair and crossed his arms behind his head, and said with a smirk on his face,
What are the odds that there's a stand user here? Like, right now. Like,
He paused and pointed to a random person in the crowd.
what if he's a stand user?
John couldn't resist the stand's jesting.
Well then, this would be a chance meeting, would it not?
He saw his stand glaring at the man in the crowd, not breaking eye contact.
DP, what is it?
John followed his stand's gaze over to what looked like an average businessman who was on the phone. He was looking right at the stand. John retracted his stand and stood up from the table, not looking away from the man. He looked up at John, and back to where the stand was sitting, not knowing what was going on. But even if he could see his stand, what would it matter? He then looked back down and saw that the chair was rocked back, as if someone was sitting there. Deep Purple materialized again.
Oops.
The stand said sheepishly.
Well, at least he wasn't looking at me, right?
John put his money down on the table as he saw a cab coming down the street. He hailed it and got in. He had a nice and easy ride to Ise, and without any trouble at all, was able to find the crime scene. He passed behind the police tape that was a few days old and saw a decrepit gas station. He walked in and talked to the clerk behind the counter.
Good morning.
John said to the man.
How's business?
Can't really complain now that the police are gone. There was a big problem with some guys a few days ago, but that's settled down now.
Oh, really? What happened?
John said, playing dumb.
Someone tried to rob the store, and shit just started floating off the shelves. Almost like there were ghosts everywhere or something.
Really?
John continued.
Then what happened?
Some guy with a knife started fighting the would-be thief and brutally stabbed him. Serves him right, though. He mentioned something about killing everyone just for the hell of it.
The man kept talking, but John's focus was broken by someone moving into his blind spot. Deep Purple muttered.
John, watch yourself. This guy's looking right at us.
Then, almost like clockwork, Deep Purple grabbed a soda can and whipped it at the man in John's blind spot. The can was sliced in half by a wrist-mounted blade that sprung out of seemingly nowhere. The owner of the gas station ducked behind the counter and shrieked,
Oh no, not again! At least take it outside this time, please!
John looked at his opponent, a short, black-haired man. He was maybe 20, surprisingly young. He wore a dark leather jacket over his red t-shirt and faded black jeans. The aforementioned blade was about a foot long and protruding from a leather wrist guard. It seemed old, but well taken care of. He held it in front of his face, staring at the fluid running down the metal, and muttered, Waste of soda. John said,
Well, should we do as he says? Or would you prefer to die in here?
The guy with the wrist blade smirked. You talk pretty big for a foreigner. How about we just cut to the chase? With this, he brought the sharp edge of his weapon to his left thumb and sliced it slightly, letting a drop of blood drip onto the steel. A thin smoke began to gather around the blade. No, on second thought, it was actually emanating from the weapon. It swirled and formed next to him, becoming lighter, until it was an odd white smoke, taking a female form. As the vapor became solid matter, it appeared as a humanoid white wolf in an orange and black kimono. Though her appearance was soft and feminine, the stance she now took was rigid and aggressive, showing claws. She snarled at John's stand, sensing that it was threateningly powerful. In a swift motion, Deep Purple lunged towards the other stand user. At first, he didn't move or even look like he was going to block, but at the last second raised his arm to stop the overhead strike with his blade. It made a loud ringing noise as they clashed, but the man's guard held strong, the blade completely undamaged. John seemed slightly caught off guard. No normal blade would be able to block a direct strike from a power stand like Deep Purple. The man ignored Deep Purple entirely, looking around him at John himself, as he pushed his arm up, forcing Deep Purple to back up a bit. John tried to back up at the man's advance, only to bump into the counter. The blade was just about to reach his neck when John caught the man's arm by pinching the guard between his cheek and shoulder. In the meantime, Deep Purple materialized behind his master's assailant and grabbed him by his hair, dragging him back to give John some space. The kimono-wearing she-wolf lashed out with razor-sharp claws, only to miss by a hair. The man and his stand were back-to-back, facing John and his Deep Purple. It was now time for John to show off his special fighting style, a unique tactic he had learned from studying battles of ages long past. The Battle of the Bulge had taught him about pincer attacks, and now he had achieved a separation. He would handle the stand user, while his stand handled his opponent's stand. Under most circumstances, the wise thing would be to distance himself from the pincer attack, but instead, the blade wielder and his stand embraced it, moving to a back-to-back position to fight. He seemed amused by this, and his focus didn't shift or appear to become divided at all. John and the man traded a couple blows, blocking each other's attacks with ease. The other side of the fight was a little less even. Deep Purple was a bit stronger than the wolf, lending a couple blows to her body before striking her in the face. She seemed stunned. The man with the blade was suddenly distracted, but didn't seem to suffer the damage himself, his attention turning to his stand. John used the opportunity to attempt to strike to his face, but he reacted quickly, blocking his arm with the blade, which appeared to crack under the force of John's amped-up fist. The man quickly slid the blade across John's arm, slicing it slightly before dodging out from between the two attackers along with his stand. They regrouped and stood side by side. The blood on the blade began to evaporate, becoming like the mist that had initially formed his stand. It gathered around the white wolf and the blade. Evanescence, the man began to explain. My stand is known as Evanescence, but it has another name, Vampiric Blade. And this is why. Right now it's absorbing your blood and repairing itself. Blood for blood. John took a second to breathe, and withdrew his stand to his side. He struck a pose and said,
Well, Since you've been kind enough to tell me about yours, I'll tell you about mine.
Deep Purple floated next to him as he spoke.
My stand, Deep Purple, allows me to make things stronger or weaker. And this includes people as well. That would explain my superhuman strength now, wouldn't it?
The man said, "Well, there are ways around that." John smirked.
It's funny you should say that. I wasn't done yet.
John held out his left hand, and on each fingertip, a bright purple light began to glow. The man readied his blade, and his stand snarled. John continued,
You can cut a soda can in midair. Let's see how many of these you can block.
John coiled all of his fingers in, then flicked them out, flinging the purple flashes of light out at the man. They proceeded to be deflected one by his blade, flying off in random directions around the room with blinding speed. John said,
Well done!
He clapped a few times, condescendingly. The man pointed his blade at John and said, If you're done with the theatrics, I see no reason in dragging this out any further. As he charged at John, John put his hands in the pocket of his jackets and turned around to expose his back. He said,
I'm a fan of old westerns. Really old ones.
A purple bullet flew around and struck the man in the arm. John continued,
Especially the ones where the bullets ricochet off of walls.
John flung 5 new purple bullets around the room as he spoke.
This is my stand's secondary ability, Tombstone Bullet. The size of the bullet decides the amount of damage and how much my stands affect you feel. A larger bullet will move slower, but pack more of a punch. So use your imagination when dealing with this.
The man in his stand started blocking bullets left and right. It was an excellent display of prowess, but each little slip-up was taxing on his body. The gauntlet eventually slipped off his wrists as the last bullet was deflected. John sent out Deep Purple to grab the man by the neck, but let his guard down for just a second. The precious second allowed the wolf, who he'd all but forgotten about, to do the same to him. The two were at an impasse. John asked,
So while we're both standing here, why don't you tell me why you killed that stand user?
The man said, He was trying to rob this place. Would have killed everyone here, too. He isn't the first of his kind I've encountered either.
You've fought other stand users?
John asked, his interest clearly piqued. Almost exclusively. They seem drawn to me. I try not to kill them when I can, but they don't often give me a choice. John called back Deep Purple, and in doing so, Evanescence pulled back, not sensing any danger. John said,
I believe you. I just wanted something to break the monotony while I search for you.
The man asked, So you're not here to kill me then? John said,
Nope. If someone wanted you dead, they would have sent an assassin, and that wouldn't have gone well for the assassin.
John held out his hand.
Nice to meet you. I'm John. John Joestar.
Kisho, said the Japanese man. It seems we have a similar goal. And so, another stand user joined the Speedwagon stand hunting team. Thanks for watching this episode of Dungeons & Dragons. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe for more. Feel free to comment your own D&D stories down below. And come follow my Twitter, @DungeonsAndDraw, where I give updates, interact with fans, and even let you vote on what story I tell next.